The incredible power of property and trusts. Hi everybody, it's FOUCHÉ, founder of the IGrow group of companies. As you probably know, we teach and train ordinary people to become extraordinary property investors by showing them step by step how to build a multi-million rand property portfolio with other people's money, other people's time and other people's knowledge so they can retire financially free within the next 5 to 15 years from today. Thank you for being here and a very warm welcome to my webinar, and thank you for investing your time in your journey to financial freedom. This webinar will hopefully give you a fantastic overview and a new perspective on how to start and expand your existing property portfolio, as well as how to grow it into a financial fortress that will serve you and your family for generations to come. I also want to address some fundamentals of why investing in real estate is so much better, less riskier, and literally much more lucrative than compared with 99% of investments in the marketplace. I want to give you a good overview of what's possible for you, but I also want to introduce you to a system and some of the strategies that myself and literally thousands of IGrow investors use to create tax-free wealth in our property portfolios. The IGrow blueprint of property investment, if I can call it that, is all about starting sequentially correctly to optimize an investor's personal, unique potential. It's all about following a systematic process to achieve each investor's goal of becoming financially free and effectively exiting the rat race of life, where the investor's passive income of their portfolio has replaced their earned income from their day-to-day employment, and where they have their money working for them so they don't have to work for their money anymore. Now, don't get me wrong, if it was easy, everybody would do it. The truth is, it's not easy. But what I can tell you is that it can and it will be substantially easy for you to achieve your financial freedom goal on condition that you invest in yourself first by learning what you need to learn before you invest in property. You can fast track and dramatically accelerate your wealth by leveraging some universal fundamental business principles that apply equally to property investors. And this is called OPM, other people's money, OPT, other people's time, and OPK, other people's knowledge. By constantly applying these three fundamentals in your property portfolio, your wealth and financial freedom will almost be guaranteed. Combining these fundamentals with a strategic system of investing in the most tax-efficient structures, choosing the highest rental income and capital growth properties, with a strategic financing strategy, comprehensive rental management, and getting SARS to fund your investment properties is what's making investing in property fun all day long. The great news is that anybody, literally anybody, can build a multi-million rand property portfolio if they really wanted to. So let's dive into the 10 reasons why I love investing in real estate and growing my wealth. Number 1, I'm building a business. I'm not just investing in property, but I'm building a real business, a real estate business and pension for myself and my family, with the rental income and capital growth indexed with inflation. Investing in property and building a long-term property portfolio makes me into an entrepreneur, and it also allows me to not just think like a business owner, but it helps me daily shape and sharpen my values as a person and helps me build and strengthen my personal character while I'm building wealth. By seeing your property investment portfolio as a business, you will become more professional and strategic about every decision you make, where you will inevitably reach the stage of financial freedom. Number 2, I can choose when and what tax I want to pay in my property investment portfolio. By ensuring I buy the right type of properties where there is tax incentives given to us by SARS, and using conservative refinancing principles and strategies within my property portfolio, I can ensure that I build my wealth legally with the receiver and the banks and the tenants' money. By understanding different tax structures, investment strategies, the power of debt and losses, you will be light years ahead of the average investor. In the bigger picture of your property portfolio, SARS will go so far as to incentivize you with more tax benefits for not paying tax in your residential buy-to-let portfolio, and allow you to use tax incentives to reduce your personal income tax while you save thousands in taxation every year. You can also build your property investment portfolio worth millions tax-free until retirement. Even at retirement, there are many strategies to implement that will decrease your tax liability drastically. Number 3, I do the bare minimum. I use other people's time and effort to work for me in my property investment business without having to pay them salaries. A very wise man by the name of Dr. Wayne Dyer said, and I quote, "Change the way you look at things and the things you look at will change." Most of my property investment team members cost me very little. Let me introduce you to some of them and the role they play in helping me in building the most lean and mean property portfolio. The banks, they pay me the money I need for the property investments I buy. My tenants, they pay me by using their income to fund my property. My bond originator, or what I call my financing strategist, work for me for free because they are paid by the banks when they get my loan applications approved. My tax accountant gets paid indirectly by SARS because of all the tax I'm saving, and this is as a direct result of the excellent tax advice he gives me. Rental management agents will be subsidized 40% by SARS because I will write the management cost off as a legitimate business expense to reduce my trust's tax liability. My financial planner gets paid commission directly by the large insurance companies when I take out life insurance, and by structuring your life insurance correctly, SARS will give you all the premiums plus 6% compounded interest back as a deduction against your estate duty liability. SARS gives me 55% of the purchase price back as a tax deduction against my personal income tax liability if I buy the right type of properties. If you buy certain properties, you can get up to the full purchase price back from SARS, 100% as a tax deduction against your personal income tax. This is a lot of money. My trust attorney or structuring specialist. By structuring my assets into different trusts, I will never own my assets, and the tax my family will save on my death will be millions in comparison to the little bit of cost I paid by setting up the correct property investment structures for my properties and businesses and other assets. If I have any burning issue or pressing problem, one of my team members in my property investment business gets paid by the hour for their advice or strategy. I write this off against any tax liability as consultation fees for growing my property business and portfolio. I have found by getting the right advice, it pays for itself, and you eliminate worries or wrong decisions that can cost you very much money over the long term. By getting the right advice, you also make so much more money that you would not have made, and you gain the knowledge forever to use in future property transactions to accelerate your wealth and your knowledge. Reason number 4, the return on investment in a correctly structured buy-to-let property portfolio is spectacular. It is very possible to make returns of 50%, 100%, and even 1,000% or more on your money invested. We will talk about this more when I will share with you the concept of gearing. But in short, you can buy a R1,000,000 property with R100,000 deposit and borrow the balance of 90% at the bank. If the capital appreciation is 10% for the year, then your equity would have increased with R100,000. Your return on investment would be 100%. Very few other legal investments can give you more than 100% return on your money invested. Reason number 5, investing in property is inflation linked. The capital plus the rental income stream is linked to inflation. You can index your income as well as your capital against inflation. If you compare money in the money market or in a fixed deposit where you earn 6% interest and inflation is 6%, your real growth or real return is 0. With the right type of buy-to-let property portfolio, your income would increase every year with between 8 to 10% and your capital growth with 8 to 10% every year. These are conservative estimates. An indicator of future performance is to look at past performance, and the average property value has increased with 11.12% every year compoundably since 1966 to 2013. I will share some of these stats later with you in this webinar. Reason number 6, I don't own anything but control millions of real estate and businesses. I buy properties in different trust structures as well as starting new companies with a shareholding always protected in a separate business shareholding trust. My properties are bought directly in correctly structured property investment trusts. I do this for many different reasons. The four most important reasons are: number one, asset protection; number two, tax efficiency; number three, continuity and succession planning; and number four, to be able to leave a legacy for my family and my descendants. Most investors make the mistake to focus only on wealth creation and not on wealth protection. These two twin fundamental pillars should form the foundation for any entrepreneur or property investor's starting point. By owning nothing, you will not be able to lose anything. You become a lot more confident in knowing your wealth and family's assets are protected because it is in the correct entities. The two fundamental pillars for property investors is to have a wealth protection trust, a family trust, and a wealth creation trust, a property investment trust. Our family's personal plan is to pay no tax on my death, and this will save my family millions in taxes saved. This money that is saved in tax can go to my spouse and children and their children to build the necessary foundation they need for financial security and financial freedom. Reason number 7. SARS is willing to fund my retirement, my property investment portfolio, by giving me back millions over time. Through strategically implementing tax incentives like Article 13(6) and investing in certain earmarked UDZ tax zones, I dramatically increase my return on investment and my personal cash flow. Very few people and investors understand which type of properties will qualify for an Article 13(6) tax incentive and how to claim these tax incentives optimally in their personal names and in their property investment trusts. But if the property deal that you consider buying makes financial sense and you add a tax incentive like Article 13(6) on top of it, you can seriously increase your monthly cash flow and your return on investment in your portfolio. Reason number 8. I love buying equity in my deals. This means buying below market value. I always like buying property below current market value. You make your money when you buy, so buy right and at the right price. I never squeeze sellers down to the last single cent, but I want a good, solid, sustainable deal. I'm always on the lookout for the following 3 key components in a prospective investment property. Number 1, equity, by buying below market value. Number 2, sustainable high capital appreciation. And number 3, sustainable high rental income growth. Because I'm a long-term property investor and not a speculator of properties, I take on an average minimum 20-year perspective in my portfolio. By looking beyond the obvious, there are some real bargains out there, and by offering the seller certain terms or even a cash purchase, you could end up with a property that you buy for up to 30 to 40% below current market value. Reason number 9. I can spend less than 4 to 5 hours a month on my property portfolios. My property investment team is spending 95% of their time in my business while I'm spending 5% of my time working on my business. Running a professional buy-to-let property portfolio consisting out of multiple properties is incredibly profitable, although I'm not paying tax. While I'm spending the majority of my time evaluating and comparing new property opportunities to acquire into my portfolio. My team is spending their time managing my portfolio, which include rental management, maintenance, bookkeeping, spreadsheets, etc. I love doing the fun stuff, which is strategizing with my team about where and how to get the best deals and financing terms, as well as expanding my asset base and growing my wealth. Once you've achieved this stage where your property portfolio is sustainable, you should not spend more than 4 to 5 hours a month on your portfolio. As an example, I'm honestly not interested in who of my tenants have paid their rent. I want to know from my accountant and rental management team who has not paid their rent. By having the team, systems, structures, and end goal in place, property investment is the most stable, profitable, and less time-intensive business you can build and create long-term sustainable wealth with. Reason number 10, buying property with no money down. It's exciting to buy millions of rands of properties with none of my own money. By structuring my portfolio where I release equity out of one of my investment properties To buy more investment properties without it costing me a cent out of my own money is a very exciting way to increase my net wealth. Like I said, this can be done without using my own hard-earned after-tax money. Today, I need to grow my property portfolio just to avoid paying tax and use the equity from one property to pay for the deposits and shortfalls of more investment properties. This is one of the key strategies Robert Kiyosaki, author of the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, has implemented to build a property empire. Over and above this, SARS gives me a minimum of 55% back as a tax write-off against the purchase price of the property and against my personal income tax. In some cases, you could get up to 100% tax write-off on the condition you purchase the right kind of properties, which we have available for our investors in the IGrow investor portfolio. So by not paying tax and by deliberately acquiring more assets, SARS gives me a further substantial tax write-off to reduce my personal taxes. Amazing, but true. What I have discovered is that unfortunately, when most inexperienced property investors enter the market to start building their property portfolio, the following is normally what they do. Firstly, they try and do it all by themselves without a tailor-made property investment strategy and a specific outcome and end goal. So they buy the wrong type of properties in the wrong entity. Most of the time they buy the properties in their own individual name, and they get financing at the wrong bank. Then they get the wrong tenant and the wrong rental management agent to manage their properties, and they lose money and also faith in property as a wealth creation vehicle. Here are 5 things to remember when building your property portfolio. Number 1, never buy where you would like to live. Many investors are looking for a primary residence and investment property at the same time. You will never live there. And if you drive past your property once every 10 years, consider yourself lucky. Your rental agent will manage your investments. You need to manage the numbers. Number 2, never buy with emotion. Buy the numbers and make a pure investment and financial decision. Number 3, cater for your tenant, not for you. It's about what he likes, not what you like. You will never live there, your tenants will. Number 4, you don't have to like the property to make money with it. Do you love the shares, gold or retirement annuity you invest in? Or do you invest to make money with it? Then why should investing in property be any different? Number 5, know your outcome and end goal and start by implementing the correct structures that will set up your financial foundation for generations to come. Here are 11 quick reasons why IGrow investors are outperforming the average property and property investor in the market, and why we are achieving much higher returns than what the average property investors do. You probably know by now that the IGrow investors invest in entry-level type investment properties. Let me first just define what a typical entry-level property looks like. It's an affordable property, normally below 1 million rand in price. It's a 1, 2, or 3 bedroom freestanding townhouse or sectional title property, always situated in a security estate. Remember, our entry-level properties are close to our tenants' place of employment. It's close to schools, shopping centers, public transport, hospitals, and normally a creche for the children, and is in close proximity to highways and freeways. The first reason why the IGrow investors choose entry-level property as their underlying asset class for wealth creation is, number 1, investors get maximum financing from the banks. More and easier financing is available on lower priced properties. Believe it or not, but in more than 98% of the cases, the banks perceive the risks to be lower. The banks give you more money to buy these properties. This means you will have more money available to buy and grow your property portfolio. It should make sense, right? Reason number 2, less deposits are payable on lower priced properties. This means more cash flow in the investor's pocket and more to reinvest. Number 3, investors achieve a higher rental income on a lower priced property. Investors' rental yields will be in most cases a lot higher on an entry-level property than on a luxury 3 million rand property. Rather buy 500,000-600,000 rand properties to the value of 3 million rand and achieve 26,000 rental on 500,000-600,000 rand rental properties versus 16,000 rand on one 3 million rand property. Number 4, Investors' risks are spread and diversified. Instead of receiving one rental income stream on one expensive property, why not rather receive 5 rental income streams on 5 smaller properties? If one tenant vacates his property, you still have 4 rental income streams, which decreases your cash flow risk dramatically when compared with owning only one luxury 3 million rand property. Not only will your cash flow risk be dramatically mitigated, but your rental will be approximately 10,000 Rand per month more by just choosing the right type of properties in your portfolio. This will add up to 120,000 Rand per year and a lot more than 2.4 million Rand over a 20-year bond period. And this is on 5 entry-level properties. It's super easy to find tenants for entry-level properties. The rental market is literally booming with tenants everywhere, with almost 90% of salary earners in South Africa not being in a position to buy a property. Their only option is to rent. This means close to 90% of salary earners in South Africa become our tenants. The demand for residential rental accommodation in South Africa in the entry-level segment, without me being overdramatic, is just insane. Not one of our investors' properties are vacant unless they bought the wrong property in the wrong area. Vacancies in the entry-level segment should not even be a factor to worry about. Number 6. South Africa's got the second fastest growing middle class in the world. This is due to black economic empowerment and affirmative action. The black South African middle class community is expanding rapidly and today constitutes more than 50% of total home loan applications, while white buyers represents only 40% of the total number of home loan applications. The socio-economic table has turned and many smart investors are capitalizing on this ever-increasing trend. The question I want to ask you is, are you profiting from this? Reason number 7. The capital growth on entry-level property outperforms the capital growth on more expensive properties. The primary driver for growth is demand. Demand is driven by affordability, and the largest segment of salary earners are earning just enough to either buy or rent in the entry-level segment of the property market. Because the competition is fierce to buy or rent in the entry-level segment of the market, this massive demand is pushing up capital value of properties as well as driving rental increases sustainably in the entry-level property segment. It should make sense, right? There are hundreds of thousands of people earning between 15 and 22,000 Rand per month. Then there is earning 100,000 Rand plus a month. So statistics have proved over and over again that the percentage growth for entry-level price properties is much higher than the higher priced properties, especially those the average person would like to live in. Investing in property should always be a financial decision and not an emotional one. Reason number 8. Investors are investing in security. The need for security drives the increasing demand for tenants wanting to live in security estates. Unfortunately, South Africa has got one of the highest crime rates in the world. Crime is an opportunity for property investors, and by selecting a well-run entry-level security estate and complex as a long-term buy-to-let investment, investors are generating greater and more sustainable capital growth returns over the long term. Number 9. Entry-level properties are easier to sell and very liquid. Because of the large volume of people that can afford to buy entry-level property versus more expensive property, it also makes selling them a lot easier and a lot more lucrative and liquid than higher priced properties. Most of the property critics are claiming that property is a very illiquid investment, but by merely having an access facility registered on your property, you will have immediate access to liquidity, and knowing that your cash flow is just 2 minutes away from an internet bank transfer should give you ample peace of mind. Number 10. Entry-level properties is a basic human need. It's a necessity. It's a must-have, not a nice-to-have. There will always be a never-ending demand for the 3 basic human needs, which is food, clothes, and shelter. And our simple entry-level property falls into the shelter category, where there is a relentless, ever-increasing demand and need for. These reasons mentioned above are some of the basic drivers for entry-level properties and the main reasons why they will keep on growing and keep on making money for smart investors. Reason 11. Multiple properties means massive tax incentives. Remember, the harder you work for money, the more you pay in taxes. The harder your money works for you, the less you pay in taxes. And if you can get other people's money to work for you, you will even pay less in taxes. The South African government gives entrepreneurs, investors, business owners, and of course, property investors enormous tax incentives if they give government what they want. Our government wants more affordable housing. As you know by now, there is a ever growing and increasing demand for it. Tax incentives like Article 13.6 and investing in specifically earmarked UDZ, urban development zones, could increase and enhance investors' returns from a negative monthly cash flow to a substantial positive cash flow on their property investments. The middle class pays the most tax, and government use the taxes of the middle class to subsidize the property portfolios of the property investor. Now, before we move on to how to structure your property investment trust and family trust, I want to share with you some real stats and facts that will make you sit upright about the growth in property prices in South Africa. Many investors ask me what I think the capital growth will be for properties over the next 5, 10, and even 15 years from today. The truth is that nobody knows. But looking at the 11 reasons given above and the strong demand for entry-level properties in South Africa, I see a very lucrative investment in property for many years to come. Let's look at what the actual average nominal house price growth in South Africa was over the last 48 years. The facts are clear. House prices have grown at an average annual rate of 11.12% from 1966 to 2013. From 2013 to 2050, property prices, given a compound annual growth rate of 10%, would give us a property which will be valued at 39,686,528 Rand. Now, if that's too far into the future for you, let's look at what the average property will be worth in 2020, given a compounded growth rate of 10% per annum. In 2020, the average property price would be 2,274,378 Rand. By looking at these capital growth stats, you can clearly see the effect of compounded capital growth over time. This is exactly what our investors and me personally are investing in: compounded capital growth. Now, if you own multiple properties, the compounded effect becomes staggering. Past performance is normally a good indicator of future performance. Historically, property values has always risen and it will keep on rising in the future. I'm edging my very stable buy-to-let portfolios to grow with at least 8% to 10% annual compounded growth on average over the long term. By applying some strategic gearing to this already excellent growth rate, investors' returns can be in excess of 50% to 100% per annum and even more. It's hard to believe that you could have picked up properties at 11,298 Rand in 1967. This may seem like peanuts to us today, but in those days, it was a lot of money. You always need to look at the percentage increases in property prices and not in the Rand value increases. It's hard to believe that you could have picked up properties at 11,298 Rand in 1967. This may seem like peanuts to us today, but in those days it was a lot of money. You always need to look at the percentage increases in property prices and not the Rand value increases. And if you are just a little bit of an entrepreneur and an informed investor, you would probably buy as many properties as you can afford today so you can lock in the price and look back in 10 to 20 years from now at a multi-million Rand pension and property portfolio that will guarantee your financial freedom. You might think this is risky, buying multiple properties. But not buying properties and not being in a financial position to secure your and your family's future is a much bigger risk. Remember, the more you seek freedom, the more security you will have. The more you seek security, the less freedom you will enjoy. People always ask me, what if my tenant decides to stay in my property and not pay his rent? Well, by ensuring your rental income, investors ensure predictability, stability, and peace of mind managing their portfolios. By ensuring our biggest fear as an investor is taken care of, property becomes a lot easier and much more fun. Many of our investors are insuring their rental income for a nominal 160 Rand to 200 Rand per month premium. This ensures that the investor's rental income comes into their bank account every single month, even if their tenant stays in their property and does not pay his rent. By ensuring your most essential component, your rental income stream, your cash flow stream, you will have peace of mind as a property investor. This is how young property investors in their mid-20s can afford and are buying multiple properties and own a multi-million rand property portfolio just by making sure the risk of rental is completely mitigated. Let's talk about the ideal structure for property investors. Every property I buy in my portfolio, I see as a new business I have acquired. Building a property portfolio is certainly a big business that requires the same mindset, strategy, and care that any business owner can provide his own business. But we all have heard it before, and if the fundamental foundation of the business is not solid and sound, then the business could be in trouble. By implementing the correct business structures to build your property portfolio in is crucial for sustainability, tax efficiency, risk mitigation, continuity, and asset protection. Investors sometimes have the most complicated structures and ideas about what entity and structuring they should utilize for asset protection and tax efficiency. You have an option to elect any one of the following ownership structures and options. Some you will discover is clearly more powerful than others. Technical advice and tailored advice for investors' specific needs can be provided to you to our Platinum members by the IGrow Trust experts and our investment expert team in a one-on-one personal consultation. Here are just 4 different ownership structures for property investors. Number 1, buying properties in your own name as a natural person. Now, it might sound like my advice is contradictory from what I normally recommend at our property investment live seminars, but I do recommend in very select and specific circumstances, depending on the investor's goal, it could, from time to time, be smarter to start with investing in your own name instead of the preferred structure called a property investment trust. This is very investor specific, and factors driving this decision would be your life cycle, goals, capital availability, affordability, and time horizon, as well as your exit strategy. This we discuss and strategize with our Platinum members in a one-on-one personal consultation. Number 2, buying properties in a partnership. This could work, but if you're not careful, this could be the highest risk medium of them all. A partnership could quickly become a sinking ship. If you get it wrong, you will have half the profits and double the risk and double the exposure. What is critical for you to understand clearly as a property investor is to know how the banks will look at current exposure and future exposure for financing purposes. And this, I have found, is never understood nor explained properly by property advisors and property advocates. If you and your partner go in on a 50-50 partnership, the banks will look at all your current exposure and the exposure of your partner for existing properties. The banks will also have you and your partner respectively stand surety and hold you jointly and severally liable for each other's debt. For future purposes of getting future financing from the banks will not take into account that both are contributing 50-50% towards the bond repayment and will effectively see that each partner is respectively owning the full outstanding bond debt that the partnership acquired. Another reason to think it through when investing in a partnership is that your partner's situation could change drastically. Like your partner may want to buy a primary residence for himself and his spouse, and then when applying for a bond, the banks will take the full outstanding debt of the partnership into account as existing exposure against his name. This means future financing can be very hard to come by and can severely influence future progress and the expansion of your property portfolio. Number 3, a company is a structure many investors use. A company owning residential buy-to-let property is not advised, even if the shareholding of the company is held and owned by a trust. You cannot get money tax-free out of a company, and this can only be achieved by a salary or a dividend, which are both taxable. If the company's shareholding is not held by a trust, it will form part of your personal estate, and this is something we want to avoid at all costs. Number 4, a property investment trust. We refer to a very specific trust called an inter vivos discretionary property investment trust. I can confirm that from personal experience and coaching and consulting with thousands of property investors having these exact structures, that this is the perfect and most tax efficient structure ideally suited for investors that are acquiring a buy-to-let property portfolio. We refer to this trust as your wealth creation trust. You will also have a second trust called a family trust, your wealth protection trust. The ultimate end goal for property investors, entrepreneurs, and business owners is to own nothing and to control everything, to have your personal estate at zero, a total net worth of zero. Myself and my team are constantly astonished at the immense amount of misinformation that surrounds trusts and property investment structures. The concept of a trust is over 900 years old and originates from English law. I will try and make this material as understandable as possible for the layman so that he too can comprehend the incredible power of trusts as an indispensable wealth creation and wealth protection vehicle for creating and sustaining long-term wealth. The one trust that is perfectly suited for long-term property investors is the Inter Vivos Discretionary Trust. It is a living trust. We highly recommend that if a trust is set up, that it will be created with the following two primary reasons and objectives. Number 1, asset protection purposes, and number 2, for tax efficiency. There are a myriad of other technical and phenomenal benefits that we explain to the IGrow members when we set up their family and property investment trusts. Let's look at what a trust is and one of its many definitions. A trust is a separate legal entity, but not a legal persona or a juristic person per se. A trust is created by a contract called a trust deed. The three parties entering into this contract, the trust deed, would be a founder, trustees, and beneficiaries. The trust deed is lodged with the master of the local high court and is then allocated an IT number. This is the registration number of the trust deed, the IT. It stands for Inter Vivos Trust. The IT number of a trust is like a natural person's ID number. A trust can be described as a legal relationship created by a person known as the founder by placing assets under control of another person known as the trustee during the founder's lifetime, known as an inter vivos trust, or on the founder's death, known as a testamentary trust for the benefit of the third parties, the beneficiaries. IGrow do not and will almost never advise for a testamentary trust to be set up for property investors. You will more than likely find that the insurance companies and banks will advise their clients to transfer their assets to a testamentary trust after their death. This is totally counterintuitive to what we establish for our property investors and what we would like them to achieve, which is we want our investors to own nothing and control everything. We don't want our investors to build a multi-million rand portfolio asset base in their personal estates that will be heavily taxed on death and will have no asset protection during the lifetime of the investor against creditor attacks. If a trust is good enough for your family when you die, then it is certainly good enough for your family and you while you are alive. But not having your assets transferred into your inter vivos discretionary trust while you're alive, you will not enjoy asset protection, tax benefits, and the longer you wait to protect your wealth and assets, the more riskier life becomes, and the less tax you can save, and the more you will pay to protect your assets later in life if you want to transfer them to your family and property trusts. Property investors are business owners. They are real entrepreneurs. The average business owner or entrepreneur today, according to statistics, 8 out of 10 will close their doors within 18 months of opening them. Although building a property portfolio is by far the lowest risk business you can start, it has its risks, and therefore the investor needs to be vigilant and proactive in his approach to protect and create wealth in his wealth protection and wealth creation trusts. The most common mistake attorneys and accountants make that set up trusts is they follow the proverbial put all your eggs in one basket approach, and this could have devastating consequences. The secret of asset protection is the compartmentalization of your different assets, properties, and investments in separate purpose trusts. For example, you don't want all your paid up assets in the same entity that holds all your indebted assets, the assets with bonds, sureties, and risks attached to them. Intelligent property investors separate their liabilities, their risks in one trust, the property trust, and have their paid up assets in another totally separate trust called a family trust. So if something happens to the trust that holds all the risk and liability, it will have no effect or financial impact on the trust that contains all the paid up assets. This is smart structuring and is very simplistic and cost effective, as you shall quickly discover. Real entrepreneurs and property investors' primary purpose is to build their wealth outside of their personal estates within the right type of trust structures. It's all about how solid your foundation is. What is the purpose of the family trust, the wealth protection trust? Each trust deed is unique and specifies exactly the roles of each of the parties within it. The trust deed will specify that the trustees in their sole discretion will decide how and when income or capital should be distributed by the trustees and in what proportion and to whom and when. The trust deed will also specify the name of the trust as well as the relationship between each of the parties. All the assets you own in your personal capacity, that is unencumbered, paid up assets, or where there is no debt attached to these assets, should be transferred to your family trust, your wealth protection trust. This will be your personal assets like furniture, motor vehicles, boats, cash, life insurance, artwork, jewelry, or anything you might own that is considered an asset in your own name. The family trust does not mean that you need a family first before you start protecting your assets. You can start immediately, especially when you start signing sureties for properties in your property investment trust, the wealth creation trust. This is important to remember. When the banks ask you to sign personal surety for the properties that the property trust will acquire, you are supposed to have already moved over all your paid up assets to the family trust. If you have done this by mere book entries, your paid up assets will be safeguarded against creditors, SARS, the banks, and any other personal sureties you've already signed for. The four fundamental unbreakable rules of the family trust. It should not contain, number one, any loan accounts, number two, no liabilities, number three, no debt, and number four, never any sureties. Only paid up assets as mentioned. This will effectively mean that you will personally own none of the movable assets as mentioned above in your personal name. The family trust will be the legal owner of your assets. In subsequent training, I will be explaining the simple process of transferring your movable assets to your family trust, where this transfer of assets will cost you nothing to effect. When your paid up assets is correctly transferred, you, the property investor, will be protected against risk and claims from creditors, as well as substantial death taxes on your demise. What is the purpose of the property investment trust, the wealth creation trust? In this trust, you will be buying your buy-to-let properties. This is the trust you will use to expand and expedite your property portfolio in. Your intention should be clear, and this is to build a sustainable property portfolio containing multiple properties that you keep for generations in the property investment trust. Your buy-to-let property portfolio should be strategically refinanced, and your intention should not be to sell the properties. If you have to sell because you bought a lemon, a non-performing property, your tax savings from selling out of the property investment trust will still be more tax efficient as what it would have been if you sold the property out of your personal name. We will talk about the taxation of trusts and tax benefits in subsequent training sessions, although I will touch on some core trust tax benefits shortly. In the property trust, you will be able to grow your property portfolio through the ongoing capital growth, rental income, strategic refinancing, and tax incentives given to property investors by SARS. In this trust, you will have multiple properties depending on your exposure and your personal financial risk profile. There are certain advisors and authors in the property game advocating that for every property bought, a separate and specific property trust must be created. This, in my opinion, is not sustainable and certainly not financially viable considering all the financial administration and red tape. There are a few of the IGrow investors who own 100 properties and more. One of our investors own more than 700 properties. Can you just start to imagine the legal and accounting costs pertaining to 700 trusts? It will be a ridiculous thing to do. So, you and your property investment strategist and team should decide when your property trust has reached its maximum level of risk exposure before creating property investment trust number 2. I recommend between 5 to 10 properties per investment trust as a very general rule of thumb. The 5 fundamental and unbreakable rules of the property investment trust. Number 1, it will only contain liabilities, bonds on your buy-to-let investment properties. Number 2, it should only contain properties and no other assets. Number 3, there will almost always be debt attached to these properties. As discussed, we gear our properties with OPM, other people's money, the bank's money. Remember, the interest on the bonds serve as a substantial tax deduction to reduce tax liability with. Number 4, there will always be risk contained in this entity, hence the bonds, tenants, and even the municipalities that collect rates and taxes. Number 5, there will almost always be sureties signed in this trust. The only way this trust will be able to qualify for a buy-to-let property is where the trustees in their personal capacity sign surety for the properties the property trust acquires. By creating 2 trust structures, you have now effectively separated your paid-up assets from your non-paid-up assets. All your risk lies in one structure, the property trust, and all your paid-up assets with no risk lies within your no-risk structure, the family trust. The one's risk cannot affect the other. 2 totally separated risk compartments. I call this very intelligent structuring. Now, let's have a look at the taxation of the inter vivos discretionary trust. Most people are misinformed and negative about how trusts are taxed. But if your trust deed is worded, structured, and administered correctly, you can save yourself thousands and even millions in taxes by having your assets secured in a trust. If you adhere and leverage trusts and trust tax law, your tax benefits and savings, if used in conjunction with your buy-to-let property portfolio, can result in incredible wealth acceleration. It's not how much money you make that counts, it's how much you keep. And if you channel the additional and extra tax savings into more property acquisitions, you will become richer and richer. By transferring all your assets to a trust, there will be a massive saving on taxes payable at death. If you have no personal estate at death, there will be no estate duty and no deemed disposal, which triggers capital gains tax, and also no transfer duty to transfer properties to your respective children or heirs. This means that your trust assets will live in perpetuity from generation to generation without incurring any tax liability. Here is a very brief and holistic overview on the taxation of trusts. The primary reason to set up trusts is to protect our assets, especially for property investors, entrepreneurs, and business owners. There are primarily 3 forms of income that the trust will generate and earn. Number 1, dividends. Number 2, interest income. And number 3, rental income from your buy-to-let investment properties. The rental income is the income received from the tenants in the property into the investment trust. There are certain expenses we can utilize as tax deductions before we pay tax on the rental income, like levies, rates, taxes, maintenance, electricity accounts, rental management costs, etc. The interest on your bond is, of course, the biggest deduction of them all, bond interest. In normal circumstances, the interest portion will be more than your rental income and your property trust will be making a loss. Now, this is very important. The loss will never be lost, but will accumulate year after year and will be seen as an assessed loss that can be carried over to the next financial year until such time that the property makes a profit. When your rental income turns profitable, the trust can use all the accumulated losses to offset against the rental income to reduce the trust's tax liability. Many other costs can also be deducted in your property trust, your property business, as legitimate expenses to write off against income, like accounting costs, travel costs, telephone and cell phone accounts, independent trustee costs, marketing and advertising costs, as well as educational costs like your platinum membership when you become a member of the IGrow Property Investment Club. A very important concept in the Income Tax Act and in trust law is called the conduit principle. For any individual or entity earning income, the income earned by that entity will pay tax on that income. A trust is more flexible and leaves the trustees with more choices and options. The trustees of the trust can choose to let the trust pay income tax on its income, or they can elect for the individual beneficiaries to pay that income tax. If the trustees decide to exercise their discretion on the income generated within the trust to the beneficiaries via the conduit principle by means of a distribution, the tax will be paid by the beneficiaries as natural persons at their own marginal tax rates. If, however, the trust income is retained in the trust at the end of the financial year, then the trust will pay 40% tax. So why would you have the trust pay at 40% tax if there are beneficiaries that can pay tax in their own marginal tax rates at a much lower rate than the property trust, like your minor children, for example, under the age of 18? The first 70,700 Rand per taxpayer per financial tax year is tax-free. This means that the rental income or interest earned which the trust receives can be declared in the hands of the beneficiaries. The interest or rental income which your trust earns can be declared in your beneficiary's personal tax returns and not the trust's. This means taxation can be dramatically minimized and directed to acquiring more income producing assets like your buy-to-let property portfolio. Capital gains tax and income splitting. In theory, a trust pays 26.67% capital gains tax, while an individual pays 13.32%. By splitting the income in the trust between one or more beneficiaries in whatever portion allocated by the trustees according to their discretion, you can take advantage of the lower taxation rates of the beneficiaries. By splitting the income between the hands of the beneficiaries, the capital gains tax could effectively be lowered than what you would have paid if you would have sold the property out of your own name. It's important to remember that although the capital gains tax could be less in the trust, it will never be more than what it would have been in your personal name. The only negative tax consequences with regards to capital gains tax is that when you have transferred your primary residence, the property you live in, over to a trust and you sell it out of the trust, by selling your primary residence out of the trust, you will lose the capital gains tax exemption of 2 million Rand. This means that if you sell your primary residence out of your own name, you can utilize the 2 million Rand capital gains tax exemption. You need to consult with experts on property strategy and taxation before you decide to transfer your primary residence over to a trust. At IGrow, our trust and tax accountant would be the perfect expert to speak to. The long-term reality is that the death taxes you are going to pay on your primary residence when you die, by keeping it in your personal name, will in all probability outweigh the costs of transferring your residence to a primary residence trust. The reality is you will die, and taxes will have to be paid unless you have your trusts protecting your assets, protecting your blood, sweat, and tears. Please remember, capital gains tax was introduced in October 2001. Capital gains tax is levied on the growth of the assets you own in your personal name, and therefore you do not want to own the assets in your personal name. The trusts must own your assets, so the capital growth of your property portfolio and all other assets must grow in your trust and not in your personal name, in your estate. There are two very distinct cases where you will be liable to pay capital gains tax. Number one, at the time of your death, a maximum 13.32% of the total value of your net assets less your liabilities in your estate, is payable to SARS as a capital gains tax. Just because you've died, your estate will be liable to pay tax on the value of your net assets. This is what is called a deemed disposal. This is an asset created as a result of your death. There is an estate duty abatement for natural people of 3.5 million rand per spouse. That estate duty is not levied on. But if you're serious about investing in property and retiring financially free, you will quickly see yourself being worth a lot more than 3.5 million rand on your death, especially in 10, 20, 30 years from today. Remember, a trust never dies, and if you have made provision for replacement trustees within the trust deed, the trust's assets and wealth can live on in perpetuity without any capital gains or tax implications. The second scenario where you will become liable for capital gains tax is at the time of the disposal of an asset. In other words, the only time capital gains tax gets triggered is as a result of the trust selling the property and when there is a profit. If you don't sell your properties, there's no capital gains tax. That's why refinancing is so powerful, because you get to keep and milk the asset tax-free without paying capital gains tax and without paying an estate agent's commission. Capital gains tax is payable in a trust at 26.67% and 13.32% as a natural person. However, once again, in terms of the conduit principle and taking into account paragraph 80 section 2 of the 8th schedule to the Income Tax Act 58 of 1962, such gain can be distributed to the hands of the beneficiaries and can be taxable in their hands at the lesser capital gains tax rate, resulting in substantial tax savings. The capital gains tax exclusion of 30,000 rand can also be distributed and split between the different beneficiaries to further reduce the capital gains tax implications. If you want to take your level of knowledge, skills, and potential to the next level, I can highly recommend you consider joining as a Platinum Club member of the IGrow Investors Club. You will learn the practical, sequential action steps you need to take to fully utilize the power of real estate investing, as well as incorporating these steps into your investment plan to retire financially free. You won't just have access to the latest and newest property investment strategies, investment properties, and support. You will also, with immediate effect, have access to the most comprehensive, street-smart team of property investment experts for free that 99% of investors in South Africa don't have as part of their team to help them build a multi-million rand property portfolio. Your team will consist out of the following: a dedicated property investment strategist and consultant, a financing strategist, a tax and trust accountant, a financial planner, rental management specialists, trust attorney and advocate, as well as our conveyancing team. You could literally fast track your financial freedom and shorten your learning curve by up to 10 plus years by leveraging the expertise of experienced experts and advisors who are property investors themselves and who work with investors every single day of their lives, helping them grow and expand their property portfolios. In short, this is what the IGrow Platinum Club members are achieving with their property investment team. The creation of a step-by-step plan to reach the investor's goal of being financially independent using real estate. Using a market profile to determine local real estate market characteristics and determine which investment properties will best suit the investor's goal. The evaluation of properties through cash flow analysis procedures and financial spreadsheets. Investors are learning and practicing and applying creative financing techniques and strategies to increase existing and future purchasing capacity. With their team, they are successfully buying investment properties in the correct structures. Investors are creating wealth protection and wealth creation structures for themselves and their families. They are also formulating and creating a series of time-sensitive and measurable property investment goals and objectives. Investors are learning and applying basic and advanced financial calculations with the IGrow Property Investment Software Program. They are also learning how to strategically grow and expand their property portfolios using gearing, financing, refinancing, Article 13(6), and financial property investment principles. IGrow accountants are setting up the investor's full set of financial statements, management accounts, and balance sheets. This is done through IGrow Wealth Accountants, our trust and tax specialists. A similar type of service can cost you up to 20 to 30,000 rand a year, but you won't pay anywhere near that. you will be able to join our property investment club for a limited time only at an extremely low price of only 997 Rand as a once-off registration fee and 247 Rand per month for a 12-month period. Or you can elect to pay 330 Rand per month over a 12-month period. And you can also subscribe as a Platinum Club member by paying a once-off amount of 3,961 Rand for a full year's Platinum Club membership. Then lastly, I would like to offer you a wonderful free bonus valued at 4,997 Rand when you join our club as a Platinum Club member. Your bonus is the IGrow Property Investor software program that takes the guessing out of property investment, and it literally conquers 99% of your fears, because you will now be making an informed financial decision while you're building your property portfolio. We will be emailing you the Platinum membership application form directly to your inbox with the bonus IGrow Property Investor software program included in your Platinum membership. Please fill in the Platinum membership form and send it back to inquiries@igrow.coza. What I've learned over the last decade is that I need to learn from the experts, because I will not live long enough to figure it out all by myself. That there really are no limits on what you can achieve with your life, except the limits you accept in your mind. And if you want something in life badly enough, find out how others have achieved it and then do the same thing they did. Successful people have a bias toward action. If you break your big vision into small, actionable, systematic steps and take the first step right away, you will inevitably reach your destination and live an extraordinary life of wealth, health, and success. All property investors' dreams come true for them whom has the courage to pursue them. Invest strategically, invest intelligently, become financially free. Successful investing.